Welcome to Sarder TV, an idea sharing platform founded by Russell Sarder, who's an author, investor, and CEO of Netcom Learning and AI Certs. We're thrilled to have Dr. Jannis Kallinikos join us today. So Jannis, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you here.
Thank you myself. I'm very pleased to join you and your audience.
So you are a professor, a longtime professor of information systems. You're a scholar in organization and communications, and your recent book, Data Rules, Reinventing the Market Economy, that's what we're here to talk about. But before we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and your career.
A short version of myself. So I'm currently professor at Louis University in Rome, Italy, which is a small elite social science university. I'm here the last 4 years, roughly, and I joined Louis from the London School of Economics, in which I was professor over 20 years. I served several posts, including being member of a small group within the Department of Management at the London School of Economics, which is still called Information Systems and Digital Innovation Group. Mm-hmm. And I served the PhD program as a director of the PhD program of that group. And from 2015 until the day I left, as a head of that group. We speak about 12 to 15 people. So it's a small group within a bigger department of management. So I think, Vaisali, I'm a typical specimen, I would say, of academic with over 150 publications, many of which are journal articles in solid journals. Some of them in top academic journals, a lot of chapters in edited books, which is another species of outlets we commonly use, and author of 9 books in the total. That's a short version of myself. There's a lot more to say, but I think this would give a small appreciation into your audience. I have also been advisor for many funding bodies in Europe, so the national funding bodies that evaluate and distribute money to research project, and also occasionally policy advisor, and in a few cases, business consultant. Mm-hmm. But that's not my main focus. My main focus over the years has been what current academics do, which is conferencing, teaching, and writing articles for journals.
Sure. So now you have a new book that you co-authored that's coming out called Data Rules, Reinventing the Market Economy. Tell us a little bit about that book. What's the theme of the book?
The book is about data and the impact which we feel data have on society and economy. It's a book that has taken over 10 years to write, and it's a book, I think, with a distinctive claim, and one that, as a few friends of mine are telling me, sets the book apart from many other books that are being published. It's a book of ambition, in other words. Now, readership will always define a book at the very end. But at this point in time where we are now, we can say that it's a book of ambition. It's one that wants to tell the narrative of where data take us. And in doing so, it opens up and reconstruct the very notion of data, because quite a few people, I would say, have, for justifiable reasons, a very limited perception of data as something that are used by statisticians, data scientists, or engineers, and that's all. we say, and this is a distinctive attribute of this book and part of its claim, we say that data are all these things, of course, but something more than that. They are entities we use to filter, understand the world, filter facts, construct these facts, occasionally act upon these facts, and as well as an instrument, a means for sharing and therefore for communication.
Right.
That perception of data as cognitive, if you like, and social artifacts sets data rules apart from the overwhelming majority of treatments of the notion of data and gives the book its distinctive flavor.
Yeah. So let's elaborate on that a little bit more. The concept of data being more than just these technical inputs, but really shaping social and economic structures, as your book talks about. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, in the modern, in the contemporary world, first let us make once more clear the fact that data are instruments we use to mark aspects of our life, produce data, therefore, about these aspects of our life, for instance, in Facebook or in social media, who we like, which means also with whom we connect, what sorts of things we talk about when we connect. All these have been reconstructed through likes, tags, shares, and all these typical clicks that social media use. But these things, we say time and again, are not only clicks. They are obviously clicks. We can say anything about it. But they are also ways of constructing the whereabouts of people, the way they relate to others, the differences people have with other people, and through something which are called recommender systems, suggest to people other things to do, which means they carry effects on life beyond the original production of data that happens through these clicks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because when you telling me that your friend did this thing, you suggest also to me to do something else than I have done. Now, and the same you can say about data produced in commercial platforms, transactions, the way they aggregate it, they construct profiles of the buying attributes of people, and they make comparison and suggestions. And you can also say similar things, I believe, about data produced through sensors. Sensors are not universal devices. Always they ride on or they encode engineering choices as where to look and what to record. So they may seem the most natural things in the world, but even in sensor data, which we in the book very often contrast and analyze in difference to social data, data produced on social media and the internet. Even therefore, I repeat, sensor data, they have some sort of, preferences and predilections on the way they are being made data. Means what these machines can record from whence and what count as an object of recording and all this kind of stuff. For instance, how many cars pass through the gates of a certain city like London, for instance, that wants to control. Some cars may not fall within this distinction and some other may not be noticed. For instance, it's a little bit long stressed example, but an example that says, for instance, that even sensor data, as for instance, the Apple Watch, the way it captures motion, it encodes a number of engineering biases or predilections. That's why your phone and your your phone and the Apple Watch may sometimes not agree on how many steps you've done. This disagreement is a clear indication that the data that are producing these hardcore engineering conventions, even these are different. So you imagine about likes and economic transactions on the internet. So these are more open to interpretation, therefore I say. Now, once you understand this, you understand also that companies, corporations, but even political governments, they use data for a variety of purposes because they know that data can tell a number of narratives about what people do and how they do. For companies, this means that they can enter the picture and shape the consumption habits of people. For governments means ways of shaping the directions people may vote or look at a certain governmental initiatives. So the book, therefore, is about how all these things together rewrite a few fundamental premises on the basis of which businesses and other types of organizations have operated in the past. And through that rewriting, they construct new forms of organization, as we say, like platforms. Platforms are conspicuously different beasts than the standard corporations we've been, accustomed for 100 years. They are more open. Users are neither employers nor consumers. They are inside and outside. They're different types of beasts. And all of this, an argument we make, is linked with the data, the narratives the data can tell, and increasingly that these narratives are the outcome of a huge dispersion of the conditions under which data are being generated.
And so this, in your book, is where you challenge the traditional view of data as reflecting facts.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So then can you explain this perspective shift and why it's so important in understanding the role of data in our society today?
All of what I have been saying, really, the common denominator behind of what I've been saying is that data are human created artifacts. They are not natural entities. We tend to view them as givens, and the name data means givens. Etymologically, if you go back into the Latin world, I mean, one way of explaining the etymology, but we think to take data as given, as something which is not natural, is produced automatically without much thought and reflection. But when we say that data are human, we also say that data are made rather than found out there, like we found olives, or even olives are being produced today by humans, but data should be different, are made in the sense that, for instance, again, a like used as the basis for constructing the identity, the preferences, the connections of people on social media is a choice. And there is a history of that choice. It's been analyzed by others. Why like and not dislike, or why like and not other kinds of indicators. The bottom line of this is therefore the argument that data are made. When they are made, by implication, implies that some things have been put forward and some things have been relegated to the background. So the notion of likes gives, for instance, once again, some sort of priority to the way people construct what they may prefer and relate to others, right? Had we used another kind of data to mark other attributes of people on social media or the internet, as we've done before, and we still do with cookies, some other outcomes are being emerging. So that point, therefore, and is an important point of the book, though it may seem evident in some closer reflection, is important to stress time and again and remind both people and scholars that for a variety of purposes, it's important to open up the predilections on the basis of which data have been generated. We can say this about, for instance, even education. There are a number of programs today that monitor the online behavior of students. I call learning kind of platforms through which the courses are being delivered, the readings are being exposed, and by looking at what students do, how much time do they spend on this education platform, you can make, you can produce something which is broadly called learning analytics and understand the behavior of students. But what is being put into the perception of the behavior of students is always a choice. It's always a choice in the sense that what we choose to mark as important is the way the system allows us to track the behavior of the student online. I'll give you another example also, which is important. If you think of patient records, it's a completely different example. If you think of patient records in healthcare, what can be put in patient records just now is the outcome of the development of medical science and some of the limitations that have been imposed on patient records by the institutional construction of these records, the hospitals and what the hospitals can share and admit. So in these records, only certain facts are being input, not all facts. For instance, the life of individuals that are ill, patients, the general life of patients usually is something which doctors have thought irrelevant for understanding for a long time the illnesses of people. This universal truth for a long time is nowadays being questioned by companies like Patients Like Me, in which they record all sorts of whereabouts and connections of people in their regular, ordinary life. So data produced in their regular, ordinary life, rather than data being generated by the introduction of the patient with a system, doctor, or a diagnostic, apparatus, more data are being now suddenly thought as relevant. All of this, Vaisali, tells us that we make data, we construct them, and when we do them, we inevitably, as all humans do in all history, we do them on the basis of certain presuppositions.
Right.
Certain things go in, but certain others are not.
So then what are some of the implications of this?
The implications of that is, for instance, for what is being taken as given, many times is being worth of opening up and discussing. And if data and the things the data present are not universal ways of constructing the profiles and identity of peoples, they can also be questioned and sometimes being even brought to court, because some of them construct kind of prejudices and bias against certain types of people. This concern need to enter the picture, and in the past, they haven't, as a rule. One of the things we say, therefore, when we claim that data are made and they record facts, but only the way we say. They record facts after certain aspects of what would be recorded have been decided about. These kind of questions we think are important to bring forward in a variety of contexts, including the monitoring of the environment and many other things we do and which in the past have not been recorded or have been overlooked.
So then what are individuals and organizations to do? How do you develop more of a nuanced understanding of the data? What steps can we take to leverage the data more effectively while mitigating some of these potential risks?
Yeah. So, well, there are companies like the big beasts that dominate our time, like Google and Facebook, among others, that they have used data very inventively. These companies are what they are because they have been at the forefront of understanding the opportunities opened up by data. And they have used them really as the basis to build their empire. They are as a Facebook and Google and Twitter or X now. Some of these ideas, and now I speak about businesses, some of these ideas have been used inventively by many of the beasts of the digital economy. And as the outcome of this, they have also diffused and are now being used significantly by other companies like General Electric, like Caterpillar in America, like Siemens in Europe, to construct services, usually diagnostics, that were out of thinking before in the context of businesses. So an immediate, therefore, implication here is that the creation of value is very closely connected with data. And when data are taken up seriously, they may open up a wide repertoire of choices which businesses can use to promote their own objectives. Now, for individuals on the other end of the spectrum, they need to understand the data they themselves create through their participation in social media, in the internet, or in other commercial platforms. They can be used in a variety of ways, both positive and negative. And they should be aware about these things and do the best they can to achieve things which are not conflicting their own predilections, predispositions, and their own interests. This is easy to tell. It's much more difficult to achieve, as we know of all this discussion with privacy and surveillance. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But these are some of the ideas, for instance, about if you take data seriously, then a new set of opportunities open up on how to think, on how to analyze, and how to understand and relate to data, both as businesses and as individuals, and also as governments.
Yeah. And how does that get done? Some of these ethical considerations and challenges that we're speaking about, what is their role in shaping sort of our economic systems, and how do we make sure that's monitored?
If I understand your question well, on the one hand, we have data at the center of the economic restructuring that goes on today. Let me be simple and straightforward, almost vulgar. You didn't have Facebook and Google 30 years ago, right? You need to understand that these are the outcomes of not only technological developments in general, that's true, but also of inventive use of data and the way data are being generated, aggregated, and used by these companies. And these are only the tip of the iceberg. There are thousands, a lot of other companies. Most of these companies, they do things differently than prior business organizations. They produce services that are based on data. They produce value, therefore, that is based on data, and they monetize this value through the use of digital devices and data. So in this respect, we have seen a fundamental economic restructuring in which data are at the center of this restructuring. On the other side of the spectrum, and replying to your questions about ethical considerations, much of this debate socially has been carried in terms of privacy and surveillance. Both are important terms, but also have serious limitations as terms. And we analyze in the book, we've written a whole chapter on this, which it's chapter, I think, 5, in which we discuss the concepts of privacy and surveillance and why the way they have been approached in the public, but also in the academic discourses, doesn't help us to understand really the concerns and the revolutionary processes brought up by data. I'll give you a very simple example about it. Modern homes are data centers, right? Much of the data that are produced in homes today exit the little flat or apartment or villa and join data produced by thousands of other villas, apartments. The home is not what was used to be before. Yes, there was a television before, but the television didn't carry data out. Whereas most of the Internet of Things-based solutions we have today, they carry a variety of data from our private lives out into the big world. Now, this membrane of protection that existed before between the home and private life and the bigger world is not the same as it was before. How are you really to protect privacy without inflicting liberty in such a world? Because if you take from us away the services we have at our home, I think nobody would like this, right? They are integral to our life. We want to use all these devices, and we want to be able to draw on all the kind of advantages and connections and consumption opportunities that these devices and technologies offer from us. Therefore, you can't tell us, don't use this. It's not a viable solution. It's not possible.
Yeah.
So when you discuss,
Mm-hmm.
Please tell me.
No, so how do you think this data that's being collected and all these new technologies are going to continue to revolutionize our day-to-day living?
Yeah, they part of what I'm saying is exactly this. We, through several small and sometimes big steps, we have arrived at the stage in human history in which most of the things we do are part of a growing and interconnected digital architecture in which more and more of the daily pursuits of people, but also many central operations of businesses, are conducted on the basis of the data that are produced by the use of these devices. This is a new world. It's a world that wasn't there before. And sometimes many of us have talked about these things. But one of the things I'm telling you, Vaisali, is that the concept of privacy here, to come back into this fundamental debate, important as it is, it fails to grasp the fundamental fact that the way we carry out our daily life through those interconnected devices and the data they produce inevitably breaks out the protective membranes of privacy and individual life and reach out into the bigger world. And how we're gonna deal with this irreversible, according to me and my co-author Christina Alaimo, this irrevocable, I would say, evolution is not evident, but it's clear and it's important to say that some of the issues we have to discuss need to reflect these fundamental realities and the fact that data become an important instrument through which a new life is being constructed the way I've been trying to indicate.
Yeah. And it's really about everyone playing a part in all the ethical considerations of how to handle that data and the privacy, but still give us the tools and resources with the technology that we've come to rely on in our day-to-day lives.
Absolutely. And these technologies and these devices and what we do will expand and proliferate. And some of the recent developments we talked earlier about, the ChatGPT or artificial intelligence more general, is just a good reminder of how these developments, they have not reached a final stage. Well, there is no final stage, actually.
Yeah, and I want to get your thoughts on this. I want to get your thoughts on the use of large language models like ChatGPT and, the impacts that it's having on our communication and our understanding and how we're responding to the world. What are your thoughts on these models?
That's a big issue. I would say only a few fundamental things here, because it's a very big issue. Much of the way these large language models are constructed, and much of the processes of the deep learning on which they are based are ways of using data properly aggregated to train these machines, to train these systems. So what the systems learn is not something which, so to say, is not the outcome of any education, the way we understand education, human education. It is the understanding that what these systems learn is how they have been trained through the use of data to produce a particular response when certain types of data, massive data, are presented to them. And large language models are called large language models. And I will finish with this because the debate is very complex, but there's no language at all here, Vaisali. What it is the capacity of these systems to learn by something is being called tokens, which may be a word or a system of words or a syllable or a part of a word, which is being given a number. They're being tokenized. And they learn through several manipulations of probability distributions, which predict which word will come next. So despite therefore being described as large language models, these systems are systems of entering the human world of content creation through statistical techniques. about what they can learn. And we know there is a debate about how some of these systems may be biased because the data in social media by which they are trained are biased. Right. And we all know this. Huh? So in this respect, I think the way we describe the evolution of data through the centuries and how we arrived where we have arrived today is very useful also for understand machine learning and in particular large language models.
Sure. And in your book, you discuss data failures. So can you describe what a data failure is and what are the implications of these failures on innovation, on economic growth, on society, how we communicate?
Yeah, I think it's much in the same directions that we've been discussing so far. Your inability to see data as fundamental instruments for picking up certain useful aspects of reality, then by definition indicate that you're gonna miss something which is very important. We're not gonna reflect on this, we're not gonna capture on this, and neither as individual, but mostly as a business, lose the opportunities that could have been created once these data have been seen in all their complexity and all the opportunities they could support underneath. So we don't speak so much in the book about data failure as much as we speak about this issue we discussed previously, the inability to see data as fundamental filters of perception, as instruments on which we can put data together and then understand something, which means then as instruments of knowledge. And third, the inability or the failure, if you like, to see data as a fundamental pillar through which communications are being occurring in the contemporary world. These three fundamental functions, Vaishali, we time and again analyze and bring forward to the book. The data are artifacts of cognition that we use to filter the world, the instruments through which we learn about the world by aggregating this data and letting them tell us how some things are and how some things are not. And then are also important instruments we use to exchange views and communicate. And some of this communication is very technical today. It occurs through the use of APIs, but it's nonetheless communication between different machines and between those that are behind these machines.
Yeah.
So this failing is to us fundamental. And this discourse about the multiple functions of data beyond their statistical and data science qualities are important, therefore, to notice. So,
yeah. And the other thing that you talk about in your book is the fact that data's existed for thousands of years, right? Tell us a little bit about the historical origins of data and some of the changes and the evolution of data that you've seen, how it's been used in the past and how it's being used today.
Yeah, I think this is an excellent question, and I think it helps us also streamline and connect many of the arguments we have made so far. I think let me first give an example by two great American professors, both dead now, unfortunately. One of them is the Harvard business historian, Alfred Chandler. who wrote in 1977 a book which is called The Visible Hand, The Managerial Revolution in American Business. He says a lot of things, but one important thing that Chandler was so precise to see at that time was that if corporations or if companies and business operators didn't have data to compare between different products, the profitability of different products, with data about which resources were committed to produce this data, and therefore make comparisons between different products, between different sites and geographical locations. And over time, the institutions we call corporations would have never been possible to build. It means, in a simpler word, through the comparisons that data afford, organizations are able to control their operations and make informed decisions. And this is how the modern world has been built, according to Chandler, through a variety of techniques for recording data, including accounting and financial data. And this same story is being told by sociology in a different terminology, of course, by a prominent sociology and communication scholar that died in the year 2010, I think, James Benninger, that described the information origins of the economic and data origins of modern society. The same argument. You will not be able to monitor operations across the distant territories of the large nation operations in a scale as big as those in the United States of America, from east to west and from north to south. You're not being able to monitor all these operations without the data that were at the core of how these operations were assessed and compared. But if you think a little bit more closely about this, all these operations were recorded in the form of notation and writing. So all these records were paper-based written records. And this revolution starts basically 500 years ago with the invention of what we call the printing press or typography and Gutenberg. So data have not come all of a sudden, emerged from heavens. They have a history. And the history, all this history is very important. We reconnect novel trends to this older history, but also to the history that goes before modern times, and reflect the ways data has been used through clay tokens, and how clay tokens have been instruments for recording property and recording exchanges of property for the benefit of those that used these clay tokens to record property and exchange products and services, but also for the nascent city administration and for tax collectors. This is an episode. This is not a history of data, but there are a kind of selected episodes which we use to say that data have always been a central ingredient of life. The ways they've been used has been largely different because the technologies and the media were different. And that, therefore, brings us to the fundamental question that we try to address in the book, and which is, what unites digital data with these old millennial practices and what separates digital data from all this long history of data production and use. And we try to give an answer, and this answer is not a magical answer, but is an answer that uses the foundations of modern computing, and most notably the theory of Shannon and Weaver, and the way they used digital tokens to construct communications between different machines and between the users of different machines. So Claude Shannon, is an iconic figure in computing and communication, because together with Weaver, but he also alone, in 1944 published a book which is called The Mathematical Theory of Communication, which is the basis for much of data science, even if that is never recognized straightforwardly today. Some people do. Yeah. So we therefore take this lead, this path of analysis, to show how digital data, different from prior forms of data, how digital data can be aggregated across particular frontiers of life. So for instance, we can use data from one field of life with data from another field of life, from social media, from internet use, but also data from education, from business consumption. For all these kinds of data previously were in separate silos, because they have produced by particular ways of producing them based on a certain social but also technical presuppositions. Once these data are becoming digital, and plus certain other presuppositions by which they can be formatted and transmitted, it means that data from accounting can be used with data from social media, and therefore produce completely different versions of facts of life, facts always the way we have discussed today. So this effort, therefore, to show how digital data, what's the innovations that digital data introduce into the process of communication, is absolutely important. As important, and I want to stress this, is the claim that data have a long and millennial history. And some of the things digital data do are also similar to what clay tokens did.
So we have today a debate about all the ethical considerations and challenges around this digital data. Were there similar debates and challenges with the data that we've been talking about historically in the past as there are today, in a different context, perhaps?
Yeah, in a different context. But of course, there was a lot of considerations around and ethical issues around what, for instance, writing and notation will do to human intellect. In which ways, for instance, writing and notation can reinforce some cognitive intellective capacities, but also in which way they can replace them and degrade some of them. And there is a very eccentric Canadian scholar, McLuhan, who's understanding media, who even made the claim that writing and the printing press construct the simplified version of a human being. So it's not that we more or less, we reproduce some of these arguments today, but there are also new aspects that have been brought forward through the diffusion of digital data, and critically through the techniques by which this data can be generated, can be aggregated, and can be used in a variety of settings. So we have new problems as well, but some older problems are also relevant to understand in this context and use as a learning occasion. Yeah.
So yeah, you've given a great history of data. We talked a lot about data today. How do you envision the role of data evolving in the future?
Yeah.
And its impacts on the way we live?
It will be more data in the future. It's inevitable. And there will be new technologies for cracking this data and offering a version of life through the ways these data are cracked, including large language models and whatever artificial intelligence will take, whatever direction artificial intelligence will take us. There will be more of this. But at this point, I think, basically, you give me the opportunity to say something important. The world we live, the physical world we live, the social and the physical world we live, they will not disappear. That's not the claim I make, and we never make this claim in the book either. So we make a number of claims. The physical and the social world will continue, but many of things that are relevant in the social and the physical world will increasingly be framed by the production and interpretation of data. And this is a reversal, This is a shift in the way we have understood ourselves in society as compared to, in the past.
Sure.
So there will be, therefore, a straightforward answer to your question is that there will be a lot of data, an increasing variety of data, and also a lot of technologies that are necessary to summarize, mediate, share this data for us. But that, again, doesn't mean that the world will disappear. A new hierarchy of significance will be built up on the connection between data and technologies and the social and physical world.
Very fascinating.
Big questions, undeniably. And I don't think anyone has, and those that pretend to have an answer to these questions are, they are doing other things. They're not interested in reality. And yeah.
So, Professor, you've spent the last 10 years, you said, coming up with this book and researching this book with your co-author, and you've been teaching. What's next for you?
Well, we're going to continue bringing forward more clearly and more fully the implications of some of these trends we analyze in the book, which means different contexts in which data are produced, different narratives by which data tell, and all the things you and I have talked about today. We're going to continue, deepen, and more fully capture both the involvement of data in daily life, but also the way data have been used by businesses and organizations to make sense of their operations and produce new products and services. But there will be inevitable, Sally, that in one way or another, we need to link these developments to the march of AI, which is everywhere in the book, but is not mentioned other than, occasionally. It's not at the center, so to say, of the attention of the book. In some way, we have to wait, though, a little, but in some way, we're gonna try to link the construction of perception and content creation by AI to the narratives we tell about data in our book. Or, to tell it differently, we're going to use the book as the basis for approaching some of the key issues raised by AI and its development. Never forget, And the definition we give of AI is not magic. It is not magic at all. At the very bottom is engineering. At the higher level, there are various techniques for automating perception, photographs, voices. These services are already used by banks and companies. So AI is, at the higher level of AI, is a model or a variety of models for automating perception, cognition, and communication. And we need, because for instance, when you produce an answer through ChatGPT, that's what you do. You organize your learning through the production of this, and you use this to communicate with someone else that has asked about it, has requested it, or whatever. So our, therefore, purpose would be to use data rules, the book, as the basis for attacking the core of artificial intelligence developments, as these are reflected in machine learning, deep learning, but also large language models. We're not gonna do this technically. We're not engineers, and we're not statisticians or mathematicians or programmers. I want to say, we are social scientists. But social scientists in this world cannot afford performing their task without a critical understanding of some of the key issues raised by the mass of technologies and the ways they get involved in our lives. So we're still gonna use that for the social study of artificial intelligence, not the engineering study. We want to understand the relationship between these systems and human practices. We want to understand how the systems assist, but also may sidetrack businesses. And there will be a lot of such accidents, believe me. So this is therefore one of the projects. Christina is already working.
And what are some of the initial findings? What are some of the initial, your initial thoughts around how AI
I'm telling you this now. Just Christina, my co-author, the co-author of the book, is working with a few other colleagues on the automation, means large language models in hiring in companies. And they make a number of arguments about how the process can become much more effective in certain respects, but also how much of the fundamental things that marked the recruitment or hiring in business organizations are being shifted and changed, and how there are things that are won and things that are lost. For instance, as the interview was the fundamental for hiring and recruitment. We all know that because we've been subjected ourselves, as we have also used it to recruit other people. The interview is being removed from the center stage, and a text is being produced, which is being analyzed by a large language models and attribute scores into. So you understand, So some of these things are very much the offspring of data rules, but also takes it into the next stage in which artificial intelligence needs to be analyzed, really analyzed, not say, oh, artificial intelligence threatens us or is an ally to us. These things don't get you anywhere by Sally. We need critical reason and deconstruction of the good things AI does, and also those things that overlooks and ignores by design or by accident.
Well, we look forward to that research and reading
Yeah.
more about it.
Yeah. Thank you
Well,
so much.
thank you so much. Thank you, Jannis, for joining us today. This was very fascinating, very interesting topic. So thank you so much for educating us and for being here with us today.
Thank you, Vaishali. It was a complex and difficult discussion, but I think one you owe to your audiences.
Yeah.
We took that risk, and I do hope that it will read some of them, and they will then make them also curious about data rules.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Everyone should check out the book, Data Rules, Reinventing the Market Economy. Thank you so much, Jannis.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye now. Bye. Thank you for having me. Bye.
Thank you.